Welcome to lesson 2 of chapter 6, where we'll be talking all about earned media. So I'm assuming that term is new to many of you, so we'll cover it extensively here. So let's take a look at exactly what we're going to be covering in this lesson. So first, we'll talk about what it is. We will define earned media. Then we'll talk about drumming it up. So earned media is a good thing most of the time. So we'll want to figure out how to get more of it. So we'll talk about drumming it up using press releases, press conferences, and press stunts. We'll go into the details of what each of those is and how to best go about carrying them out. And then we'll wrap up the lesson talking about tracking earned media, how to keep an eye on that throughout your campaign. So let's jump into it. So what is earned media? Earned media is essentially people writing about you. So it's you do something that is noteworthy, and then people write about it and publish it for everybody else to read. So hopefully the things that you're doing that are noteworthy are good things that you want the community to know about. In a way, doing something terrible and like scandalous behavior that press is writing about and covering, in a way I guess that is earned media, but you've earned something that you probably don't want. It's like, I guess when you're like a little kid and you earned being grounded for a weekend. We want more of you earned going to get ice cream at your favorite ice cream shop after dinner. That sort of earned media. So anyway, it is the media covering you. So it could be the form of newspaper articles, blog postings, TV news coverage, radio news coverage, and interviews. Many different types of formats of interviews. So I'd say the most traditional type here is, and then also I wanted to point out here something not traditional, is social media. So if you have people writing about you on social media, taking photos of you when you're at events and tagging you, and then other people are seeing it, I think that is a form of earned media, but it's still just a little bit different. So therefore, we're not going to talk about social media in this lesson, but in the next lesson, we will cover it very extensively. You'll probably be sick of hearing about social media, so we get into it a lot. So the rest of the things here on this list. Hi guys, I just have to apologize that if I am coughing here and there during this lesson. My apologies. I got that terrible flu that went around, so I've been down for the count for like 2 weeks. So getting back into it here, where I can, I will go and edit out if I am coughing a bunch here in the video, like I just did. So if you see some editing spots, if something's a little bit disjointed here in the video, I'm just doing it so I'm not coughing in your ear. So my apologies. So the first item here, newspaper articles. This is very traditional. You get local reporters to write about the things that you're doing. It can be a little bit gossipy, kind of, but it's like what's going on around town, and then like more like political horse race following. Blog postings, that I would say is a little more gossipy in nature, and probably doesn't exist in every community throughout the country where you folks might be running for office. But in larger cities, there are a number of blogs that cover local happenings. Here in New York, I think there's a couple dozen, ranging in size, and it's just people that write about what's happening in their like immediate community or their immediate neighborhood. TV news coverage. So this is your local evening news coming in filming something that your campaign is doing and then writing about it, talking about it on their website and on the evening news coverage. Radio news coverage, same idea. There's a lot of local radio news shows. And then interviews, that could be a sit down with a reporter. It could be a sit down with a local, I don't want to, maybe like TV celebrity, or maybe there's a local person that hosts a show about like happenings around your state or your community. So it'd be like a sit down interview for them, and that could take many, many different formats. So that's an overview of earned media. Now let's talk about drumming it up. So our mantra here is that earned media is good, and how do I get more? So there's a number of different ways to get earned media, and the first we'll talk about is a press release, and we'll go into that in just one second. The second we'll talk about is press conference, and the third is press stunt. So each one of these have their own little nuances and ways of being beneficial and or risky to your campaign. So let's get into it with each one of them. So the press release. So I'm sure you guys have all heard of press releases. Maybe a lot of you have written press releases, but they're pretty critical for the campaign to communicate with the media, with the press. So we're going to talk about exactly how to craft this. A lot of people make it much more difficult than it needs to be. I've written a million different press releases in my career, and they all kind of serve the same point. But there are some key elements that need to be in there. So we'll talk about composition, who to send it to, and how to send it. So first, let's talk about composition. So I found this just like generic example of a press release online and pasted it in here so you guys could have just a visual representation of what I'm talking about here. I don't know who this guy is, Steve Gooch, running for state senate in 2016, but he's what I found online as a simple example to use. So, hey, Senator Steve Gooch, thanks for the help here. So you'll see the first thing is you'll notice is that they have a banner header at the top, like a graphical element across the top. You'll want to include that as well. And you can build this in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs or a similar word processing program. Google Docs is probably easiest, and you can just paste your campaign logo or imagery at the top. I don't like the way Steve Gooch has done this with just a simple square in the middle. I prefer to see like an actual header at the top. And then you'll want in big font towards the top, it says news release or press release or media release. You don't need to put for immediate release. That's old school. Nobody needs to do that anymore. You're sending out an email to 1 million people. It's immediately released. So you can just put news release, and then underneath that, or over on the right-hand side, as this guy has done, put a contact. So when I was serving as a press secretary to a senator in California, I would put for immediate release. Not for me. I would put news release, and then I put Secretary Evans news release. Senator Evans news release, and then I put contact, my name, Christopher Moore, and then my phone number right after it, and then my email address. So it was all right there, like one of the first lines that you could see. So it was, news release, contact information, and then you put the date of the release. So the next part that you'll want is a headline. So you can think of the rest of the press release from here on out. Think of it like you are writing a news story. That's the best way of doing it. So the first thing that you're going to find at the top of a news story is a headline. And you'd be amazed at how these things can get lifted word for word and actually used as as an actual story in a newspaper. So I did a little bit of work when I was right out of college helping, I didn't even really remember the name of the firm. I'd have to look it up. But I was helping them to do some press work and drumming up press attention for a few different initiatives. And I would send out press releases, and small little newspapers throughout California, like really small ones that were just online. Actually, I don't know. Some maybe went to print. But anyway, they would just use my press release as the story. So it was just the same words verbatim used as a story. So please be cognizant that that your words might be just lifted and used verbatim. Shouldn't be anything wrong with that, but just something to be aware of. So anyway, the very first thing that you're going to need is a headline. So just like writing a good news story, your headline needs to be catchy, it needs to be interesting, and it needs to be to the point. So a trade-off is catchy but to the point. So because something can be really catchy, maybe like clickbaity, like you won't believe what happened in South Sacramento yesterday with so much blood. You know, it's like, wait, what? Blood? And can't believe what happened? That's not an appropriate headline because it's too ambiguous. It's catchy, but it's ambiguous. So this is like, Republican Senator Steve Gooch announces re-election campaign. It's like, okay, it's catchy because someone that's a sitting politician is saying that they're running for re-election. Okay, we want to know about that. We want to know about his plans. And it's unambiguous. You know what's going on. And then he does a second line here, kind of like to add a little more color to the headline. I don't like that. It's your call. If you think that it fits right with your release, do that. I've never done it, and it seems a bit kitschy for a press release. So then the very next thing that you want to include is, in parentheses, the city where you are, where this news story is happening. So if you're running in New York City, then it's New York City. If you're running, say you're running for Sutter County Supervisor. That's the county where I grew up in Northern California, Sutter County. You're running for Sutter County Supervisor, but you live inside Yuba City. Yuba City is a city that's fully contained inside of the larger Sutter County. If you live in Yuba City and your district is totally in Yuba City, but you're running for Sutter County Supervisor, something that's larger, put Yuba City. Or if you, let me make this a little bit more clear. If you live in San Francisco and you're kicking off your campaign to run for governor of California, then you, in the parentheses there at the beginning, you put San Francisco, like where you are at the time. It needs to be a city there. It can't be like California or like Sutter County. It needs to be a city right there. That's the way that it's done. And yeah, it has to be a city. So you would have the city right there in parentheses, and then it is the lead line, lead, L-E-D-E, lead. And this is the most critical part of the press release, aside from the headline. And this is where you tell the exact, you summarize the entire story in one sentence, and it needs to serve a few different purposes. It needs to be compelling enough to make people want to keep reading, but if they don't keep reading, that they know all of the pertinent information that you've conveyed exactly what you want to convey in that one sentence. So I know that can be pretty tough, but that's too bad. That's how it works. These things are difficult to do. So, you've also heard this expression like, "Oh man, you buried the lead." So that's what people are referring to this. Like when you're writing a press release or writing an article, if you don't put the most like sexy, compelling information in the top, in the lead, then that means like you buried the lead. You didn't do your job. You didn't convey the most important piece there at the beginning. So you need a really great lead, and then the next point, and then from there on out, you just start to build on the most important facts of the release of whatever piece of news you're trying to convey to the media. So I would, in the next paragraph, put out if there's a piece of the lead, a piece of the story that is most compelling that you want to start building on immediately, you do it right there. In a press release where you're announcing your campaign, I would say 9 times out of 10, that next article is going to be a quote from you, the candidate. And that's exactly what they've done here. So this Steve Gooch says, it's a great honor to be the voice of the people, blah, 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 blah. It looks like his next quote is his next paragraph is another full quote. So this really is, this press release here is really like an official statement that's being sent out, which is a particular type of press release. But regardless, it follows all the same format. So what you'll want to do is you need all of the elements up at the top that I talked about, and then from below the lead and on, it's like building a compelling story like you would in any article. Put the most pertinent information towards the beginning of the article. Okay. Oh, and then in terms of format, I'll talk about that 1 second actually. So the next piece here, who to send it to. So I say build your own list. You can buy like media contact lists for your different areas, but it's not necessary, because you can spend an afternoon or have a volunteer spend an afternoon building a list together, or get a list from somebody else that lives in the area and is involved in like PR or public affairs or something. But you can comb through the major news outlets in your area, and there are plenty of email addresses that are listed on almost all of those websites. You can find the reporter that specifically covers local politics, and 9 times out of 10, you figure out who that reporter is, and you go to, they'll have like a little like about me or about section on the website for those different reporters, and it'll have their direct email address on there. Reporters' contact information is really easy to find. So you'll think about the like local newspapers, blogs, everybody that we outlined earlier, TV news. Think of all those different folks, make a list, see if there's specific reporters that cover local politics, and then go and comb through their websites and find the email address for each one of them. And then that is your press distribution list. So how do I send it out? Well, you're going to use the email blast software that we talked about previously, setting up for your campaign. If you're using all-in-one software like Nation Builder or other similar ones to Nation Builder, then they have that email blast capability set up within it. You just put your media contact list that you built into there. If it's a pretty small distribution and you don't have all of your campaign up and like all of your like email blast software or Nation Builder or anything, if you don't have any of that set up yet, then you can just send from your Gmail account, your personal email account, and just BCC all of the reporters on there so that everybody isn't seeing everybody else's addresses. And you can send it out that way. In terms of like the actual format of it, how I used to always do it when I was press secretary to that senator, is I would create the news release in Microsoft Word. I'd have the graphical header and like everything would be formatted really nicely so that on a piece of paper it looked great. And then I would save that as a PDF, like a printable document format. And then I would then go over to my email, and I would open up a new email, put all the email addresses in there of who it's going to go to. And then the subject line, I would make let's say the senator, let's just say was making a statement about, I'm making up a bill, AB 234. So it would say in the subject line, it would say press release. Senator Evans announces introduction of AB 234, a bill to protect wetlands. And then in the body of the paragraph, I would have my main elements that I talked about from the news release, but it would be completely unformatted. It was just plain text. And the reason you put just plain text in there is that there's no risk of like formatting and people getting it on their phone and it not looking the right way, or opening it on a tablet and then it's different. It's nice to include these things in a very plain text format, and nobody cares that it looks a little bit old school on there. And then if they want the fancy PDF version, then they can open up the attachment on there that comes through on the email. So you have the subject line that says the headline. It says, news release, and then the headline, just like we outlined earlier. And then it says, and then in the body, you do the same thing, very plain text, news release, and then your contact information, just like is here on the page, but none of that get rid of the line and the center formatting and all that kind of stuff. You just have news release, your contact information, the date, and then the headline, and then the text or the city in the parentheses, and just the text of the article. Just have everything plain text, no formatting on there. Okay, so that is press release. If you guys have press releases that you've built for your campaigns, put a link to them over in the comments over here. I'd love to take a look at some of them. Or if you have questions on yours, or you want some input from myself or our other community member folks in here, do that. Now let's talk about a press conference. So you guys all know what a press conference is, right? You stand up there and the reporters are like, oh, let me ask a question. So, on TV it's very dramatic. In real life it's different. In real life it's like you're fighting for reporters to come and be at the press conference, to cover it, and to ask questions and actually be interested in whatever's going on. So when you do a press conference, you do one when you have a major announcement. And major announcements could include announcing your kickoff for the campaign, some big new proposal that you hadn't talked about yet. If there's one big problem in particular in your community and you're announcing your plan to tackle it. Maybe you have, maybe something has been very, very, very contentious in the race, and you haven't quite taken a position on it, or a position that you did take was very controversial, and people are asking a lot about it, or any kind of big news like that, and you're going to come out and clarify your position. So it's meant to be for big milestones, big announcements in the campaign. So before you have a press conference, you need to send out something called a media advisory. So a media advisory is very similar to the press release that we just covered, but instead of putting press release or media release, you put media advisory, and put that pretty bold so people know media advisory. And then you just very specifically say that that candidate so-and-so, or assembly member so-and-so, whatever your title is hosting a media availability at such and such time at such and such location, and we'll be discussing X. And you put that in very, very, very clear terms and get it out to all of the relevant reporters with enough time for them to plan to be there. So you send it out once early enough for them to plan to be there if they can. And then you send it out very soon, an hour or two before. You do that because reporters try and plan their time. But they also have crazy, hectic schedules that change all the time. And reporters are wild people, real wild people that are all over the place. And you just have to try and catch them on the spur of the moment like that as well. And the whole idea with the media advisory is to try and get reporters to show up, to try and earn that earned media. It's probably worth giving them a call beforehand, but I'll leave that to your discretion, depending on your relationships with reporters. Okay, the third thing to note here is about stacking the crowd. So if you're making a big announcement and it's something that you are hoping is going to put a lot of wind in the sails of your campaign, then you're going to want people to be there at the press conference, at this announcement, so that it conveys the type of energy that you want it to convey. There'd be nothing worse than like a shot of you at the podium and you're like so excited to announce whatever it is you're announcing, and then the like local news guy like has a shot of the podium and then pans and there's nobody there. So you definitely do not want to do that. And you can also have people that are like behind you and up there with you at the podium. You can have guest speakers there. That's always a nice format. If you're talking about maybe a new plan or initiative that you're announcing to tackle a rise in like violence against women and problems with women being able to seek like shelter and employment in these situations of like terrible domestic abuse. I'm just spitballing stuff off the top of my head, guys. And you have this brilliant plan to address this problem in your community. So it's probably worth having someone that's an expert in that field, that's known in the community for that type of work, to maybe introduce you at the beginning and talk about you and your efforts in this regard. Maybe you have a few survivors of domestic abuse that have had a real difficult time getting employment or finding shelter or whatever it is. Have them there to talk about their experiences up there with you. So the idea is to make this a production. It's to make a very compelling case for whatever it is that you're announcing, and to have some juicy tidbits in there for the media to be able to cover. And the last point here is you want to make sure that you have somebody from your campaign, have a volunteer there that takes lots of photos and lots of videos. I think it's probably best to have two people there, one that can take photos and take nice video, and then one to go live on Facebook to cover the event. And we'll talk a lot more about going live on social media a little bit later on. But if you can get two volunteers there, one to take nice photos. They can use a phone, because phones have like amazing cameras in them now, to take nice photos and nice videos, and then the other person to just do the Facebook Live, because Facebook Live, the video doesn't turn out that great. That's not really the point, although it should look really nice. But yeah, because we'll use those assets later in our media strategy that I outline, the comprehensive media strategy that I outline in a future lesson. But yeah, you'll want to capture those photos and videos. Okay. So then after the event, you'll want to do a post-event follow-up. So what that is a lot of reporters aren't going to be able to make it to the actual press conference, but a lot of them still might be interested in covering the event and writing about the event. Like I said, their schedules are pretty crazy, so maybe they just had some good reason to miss it, or they just didn't feel like going to your press conference in person, which is understandable and fine. So what you do is you put together a press release outlining exactly what happened at the press conference. So you write it and craft it just like you did the press release that we just talked about. And in that you include the photos that your volunteer took, And if there's any good video tidbits, you include that in there as well. And make sure to tell the reporter that these assets are free to use. There's no copyright infringement or anything. These photos, this video, do with them completely as you please. Because if it's like a local TV station and if they want to show video clips, then they have a whole like legal framework to be able to do that, and they purchase video from other like third-party videographers that are out taping stuff like this. So it's a whole industry, it's a whole thing. So with that said, like when you have someone there that's taking nice photos and nice video of your event, have them keep that in mind, that the video that they're taking, that it could be on local news at night. So you're not like taking like a wobbly video of this or that, and it's not like up and down on a phone. It's taken this way, not this way, this way. And it's like steady, it's you talking, and it's a crowd, and it's nice. So nice quality stuff. Okay, so that's it for a press conference. Good luck with them. So now let's talk press stunts. So this I do not recommend as part of your strategy, except in very rare cases, but just wanted to cover it off here quickly. So a press stunt, it's similar to a press conference in that you're doing something like physical, like something in the physical world to try and get attention toward your campaign and try and get people to talk about stuff. If you do it, make sure that you get tons of photos and tons of video, because like when there are press stunts done, the attention that is gained from it is like all after the fact. So if you stage some weird, well, yeah, I guess, let me talk. I haven't really defined what a press stunt is, so apologies. So a press stunt would be doing something like if I was running for, like, let's say New York City Council. I live right here, like close to Wall Street. And over on Wall Street, there is this big building that says the Trump Building. Blech. So if I, maybe I'm running for New York City Council and like a super anti-Trump platform. So I go and set up over there on Wall Street in front of the building that says, the Trump Building. And I have a bunch of like stupid like little signs that point toward the gold letters that say the Trump Building in gold, and they say like asshole or like grab him by the what, and like I'm like dressed super funny, and then it says like Chris Moore for City Council fighting back against jerks like this or something like that. Then that's like, I mean, someone's running for city council and they're acting like that down on Wall Street in front of the president's name written in gold. Like, whoa, that's a press stunt. That's like doing something like sort of outrageous that you don't expect and trying to get media coverage of it. So if I did that, I would send out, like I said earlier, send out like a media advisory, trying to get reporters to come down there and see what I'm doing and cover and talk about it. So when do you do this? These are situations where you would do a press stunt. So if it's something that's never been done before, this truly must be novel. Me going and setting up and acting like an idiot on Wall Street in front of Trump written in gold on a building would not be the first time that that's done. At this point, it'd probably be like pretty cliche. So no, I'm not going to do that. Only do something if it's truly never been done before and very novel. Do it if it's highlighting an issue. Don't do a press stunt just for your name. If you're doing something just to cover your campaign and your candidacy, it's going to backfire. It's going to be like very like self-absorbed, self-serving, and in such a silly way, and like in like a pretty classless way as well. If you just want to get your name out there as a candidate and get people to know more about your campaign, then go out and campaign like you're supposed to and meet people and talk about issues. It would look really childless and classless, actually. So third is be respectful, and fourth, be mature. So you don't want to be out there acting like a total idiot, period, throughout your entire campaign, and doing a press stunt must follow those same rules too. So if you can find a way to do something that's never been done before, that highlights an issue, and you're doing it in a respectful, mature way, then yeah. So I'm trying to brainstorm something here that would meet these criteria. Perhaps perhaps homelessness is something that's never really affected your community until recently, and there's a growing population of homeless people in your community, and maybe you, as a press stunt, decide to spend the night living on the streets, and so you do this, and it's like leaked to local press, and they find out about it, and they come and talk to you about it, and they see you like living like this, but you talk about it, about the issue, the homelessness issue, and you do it in a way that's very respectful toward homeless people, very respectful to local community leaders that are having to address the problem at this time, and that there's nothing like kitschy or stupid about it. You do it in a very mature way. So that's one way that might work, and I'm sure there's other great examples. That's just something I tried to come up with off the top of my head. So if something is like cliche and expected, don't do it. If it's done just to attack someone, like my example earlier about going down on Wall Street, talk about Donald Trump. If something seems desperate, crass, immature, childish, just think very, very, very hard about this before you do a press stunt. And if it seems at all that it might end up looking like any of these qualities, desperate, crass, immature, childish, then definitely do not want to do that. Okay, so the last section here, press tracking. So this is pretty straightforward. You just want someone on your campaign, a communications chair, an intern, somebody keeping track of all of the earned media coverage for the campaign. So it's pretty easy with Google News. You can set up an alert that tells you whenever your name pops up in the media. If you have a fairly common name, it might be a little bit difficult. You have to add some keywords in there, like if I was running for, let's say my name was, John Smith. I mean, my name is already fairly common, Chris Moore. It's kind of like basic names. Fun fact: there is someone that has my entire first, middle, and last name, whole thing, exactly the same as mine, and they were born on August 31st, 1985, exactly the same as me. And this guy is a felon, and has terrible credit history, and has screwed over a bunch of businesses and student loan defaulting, everything under the sun. I'm really glad I can share the exact same full name and birth date as this guy. Yeah, screw that guy. Anyway, so you set up your name, and maybe you have to throw in there Sutter County Supervisor, or your city name, or office you're running for, whatever. But something to alert Google whenever your name pops up in the news. You can also do an alert in Google that doesn't look just at news sites and newspapers and stuff, but will look at just the web in general. So that might get a little overwhelming if your campaign is pretty big, but for smaller campaigns might be manageable. And then Google will send you an alert anytime your name and whatever other keywords are popping up in the media. And then just have them keep it in a file or in a binder for safekeeping, so you can follow all of that. So the idea here is, first and foremost, you're gonna want this when you're older, and just something to have as a keepsake and something that you can look back on. I like looking back at articles that I was mentioned in when I was running political organizations and working in politics more, more out there, not like what I'm doing now. And so you're going to want to do that as well. So that's one reason. Second reason is you want to catch every last thing that's out there in the media that's mentioning your name or talking about your campaign. You need to be super on top of that, I think, for pretty obvious reasons. And this will allow you to do that. I'll try and find a good link that shows exactly how to set up like a news alert and a Google alert, and I'll put it in the comments over here. It's very, very straightforward, and you can just Google it yourself too if you're having any problems with it, but I'll try and find a good link with like an explainer video. So that's it for chapter 6, lesson 2. And I think there might be a problem here with the slide. It says, lesson 1 down here at the bottom. But it's lesson 2 that we're wrapping up, so sorry about that. So we'll see you in lesson 3 in just a minute. Thanks.